Hi everyone, my name is Randy Johnson. I'll be telling you about the history of education, post-war period, years 1950 to 1980. What was life like in the post-war period? The population increased post-World War II, known as the baby boom era. Everyone was seeking equality. You had the Korean War going on. You later had the Vietnam War going on. Tension rising as the Cold War takes place, practicing precautions in case of nuclear attacks, and you had the space race. What historical events occurred during this time? Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, 1954, where the Supreme Court decision ruling that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal, therefore overturning its former ruling in the 1896 case of Plessy v. Ferguson. This ruling became the first step in the long and still continuing battle for equality in the U.S. education system. The Civil Rights Movement, a nonviolent protest used to break the pattern of public facility segregation during the late 1950s and early 1960s, led to the signing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 by President Lyndon B. Johnson, putting an end to segregation. States could lose their federal funding if they refused to desegregate their schools. The Chicano Civil Rights Movement was aimed at addressing negative racial stereotyping of Mexican Americans, as well as ending discrimination against Mexican Americans in the school system that would not allow them to be themselves, leading to the Bilingual Education Act signed by President Johnson. This offered federal money to schools whose children's first language was not English. The gender equality movement in the 1970s, where feminist leaders pushed to protect women's civil rights, looking for equal opportunity in employment, as well as addressing females' lack of opportunities in schools, leading to the Title IX signed in 1972, preventing a discrimination based on gender in all aspects related to school. Laws concerning education during this time. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, prohibiting the discrimination of someone based on their race, color, gender, religion, or national origin. The Higher Education Act of 1965, passed on November 8th, increasing federal aid for higher education, thus providing for scholarships, student loans, and starting a national teachers corps. Title IX of 1972, prohibited discrimination based on gender in all aspects to education. Equal Education Opportunities Act of 1974 prohibits discrimination and required schools to take action and overcome barriers that prevented equal protection. Legislation was important to protecting students with limited English proficiency. PL 94-142, Education of All Handicapped Children Act of 1975, required that free appropriate education be suitable to all children's needs and offered in the smallest restraining situation for handicapped children. How did schools look during this time? Schools started off segregated, mostly in the South. The North stayed true to it being desegregated. The Southeast, you had your white schools that were funded well, and your black schools that lacked supplies and space. The Southwest, you had white and Mexican American schools who felt that their heritage was being neglected. After the passing of the Civil Rights Act, you start to see the blending of schools in these areas. Later in the 1970s, gender equality is addressed with the lack of opportunities for females in the school system, such as classes and sports available to them in the school system, leading to the Title IX being signed. Schools didn't offer equal opportunities to students with disabilities, such as not setting the content up for them to succeed or even allowing them to attend school, until the signing of the PL 94-142. Who went to school during these times? Majority of the population were white Americans. You had your African Americans, Mexican Americans, Asian Americans, and by the 1970s, school enrollment began to drop for colleges. Compared to today, the white population has actually gone down in percentage-wise, while the rest of these have actually all gone up. In 1950, the African American with high school diploma was actually only 13.7%. Medical and law degree awarded to women was less than 1%, and the average school attendance was only for 9 years. But by 1980, the African Americans with high school degrees were up to 51.4%, medical and law degrees awarded to women was up to 30%, and the average school attendance was 12.5 years. What was taught? Education in the 1950s and 60s was emphasizing on students to learn through inquiry-oriented, problem-based, and the development of higher thinking skills. Lessons were planned to substitute understanding of new material with students' past knowledge. And by the 1970s, schools returned to the traditional focus on academic studies such as liberal arts, mathematics, and sciences. It's very similar to what we do today, where we focus on the academics and really focus on standardized testing. Why did students learn that type of content? This series of learning gave students subject matter choices, allowing flexible scheduling, individualized instruction, and non-graded schools. However, college entrance exam scores dropped, along with school enrollment, and society's poise in teaching began wearing down, leading to the return of traditional academic studies to improve college enrollment. How was the content taught? In this time, we have multiple textbooks were being used as an alternative to the old single textbook. Television was introduced, which advanced into educational technology, became a part of the classroom, similar to what we have today. Videos watched were standard narrated content showing how to perform skills or work. TVs were small still, making them difficult for everyone in a classroom to watch. Normally, everyone had to huddle around the TV to be able to see it. What were some of the impacts on today? As mentioned earlier, this period started with TVs, though they were difficult to watch for everyone in the classroom or an auditorium when needed. This did advance onto today, where most schools have a TV in every classroom or the use of high-definition projectors hooked up to a computer. Today's schools remain desegregated. Boys and girls have the same opportunities to participate in all aspects related to education. Children with disabilities receive the help they need while being able to interact with other students. Who were some of the influential educators of this time? Benjamin S. Bloom wrote Bloom's Taxonomy, as it's referred to, which divided the cognitive domain into 6 levels: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Samuel A. Kirk, he was named with coining the term learning disability and leading to the formation of the Association for Children with Learning Disabilities. James S. Coleman wrote the Equality of Educational Opportunity Study, or also known as the Coleman Report, which talks about how African American children value the attending integrated schools and sets the stage for school busing to accomplish desegregation. Shirley Anita St. Hill Chisholm, an African American educator who became the first African American woman to be elected to the U.S. Congress. Michael Hart, he was the founder of Project Gutenberg, invented the e-book. Here we have some pictures of these influential educators. First, we have Benjamin S. Bloom. Here in the top left corner, we have Samuel A. Kirk. Underneath, we have James S. Coleman. In the top right, we have Shirley Anita St. Hill Chisholm. And last, we have Michael Hart.